Hello, and welcome to the Once Again podcast. I am your host, Jason, and today's episode is going to be slightly different than our normal episodes. As you may have noticed, today is a solo host episode. There was a family emergency that Ashley had to attend to and is unfortunately unable to record the podcast. Rest assured, she is okay and will return to the podcast very soon, and I'd like to take this opportunity to wish her and her family well. In addition to that, today's episode will cover a different subject. While our primary focus has been on the television show Once Upon a Time, today we will focus on, well, me. This was an idea Ashley and I discussed before beginning the podcast, having an episode focusing on the hosts. I've discussed with her and decided that since she is unavailable, to go ahead and cover the first half of this team. So, where to begin? I suppose most people wonder why we started the podcast. The short answer is, we wanted to. The longer version, or my part of the longer version, is that I've been fascinated with the idea of doing a podcast for some time. I've had discussions with several close friends about doing one type of podcast or another, and truthfully, Ashley is the only friend that said, yeah, let's do this. So, why Once Upon a Time? Well, firstly, we're fans of the show. Secondly, while Once has been our main focus so far, we will cover other shows, films, books, and possibly comics soon. Thirdly, in truth, while I googled Once Upon a Time podcast, I only found one show that covered it 10 years ago while the show was airing. Other podcasts have done an episode or two looking at the series as a whole, but I couldn't find one that covered each episode of the series. Fourthly, like most people my age, Disney was a huge part of my childhood, and that's something I'd like to discuss. I remember being a kid and going to school and discussing with friends and other students about the Disney Channel, and most of them had no idea what I was talking about. I said, yeah, it's, Channel 37. And they said, Channel 37, channels only go up to 9 or 12 or whatever it was that they went up to at that time. And I realized that my family was fortunate. We had cable, while the other students were just using their rabbit ears to catch the airwaves and see what was on broadcast television. I also have memories of staying up late at night before I was in school, staying up late at night with my dad and watching old episodes of Zorro that the Disney Channel aired, or they would have episodes of The Wonderful World of Disney, or it might have been called Walt Disney Presents, or it might have been called Walt Disney Presents The Wonderful World of Disney. I don't remember, truth be told. But that show would cover just different aspects. I remember a specific episode about Epcot being built and what that was going to be like. And I remember an episode about the different animation studios and animators and the techniques that they used, behind the scenes stuff that I just found, even as a child, fascinating. Another big part of my childhood was the ABC Friday Night Lineup, or TGIF as it became known. I remember watching Boy Meets World, Step by Step, Family Matters, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Full House, all these shows that, for the most part have had sequel series or spin-off series and great success of their own. I also spent some time with my grandparents, and when I was there, they had Disney movies for us to watch. I remember specifically being at my paternal grandparents and them having kind of the scary Disney movies, or scary Disney movies for me at the time, like The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which had the Headless Horseman in it, or Fantasia, which I was fine with up until, the demon comes out of the mountain, and it terrified me as a kid. Still kind of terrifies me as an adult. But I also can have this vague memory of the first movie going to see in theaters, and it being Beauty and the Beast, and just really being amazed by the animation and the music and the songs and just the great storytelling. Um, I know it got nominated for an Oscar, and I think it might have been the first animated film to ever be nominated for an Oscar, and it didn't win, which to me is still a crime to this day. But a few years after that, movies like The Lion King and Tarzan and Lilo and Stitch and the Pixar movies, Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Disney was just on this roll where they could almost do no wrong throughout my childhood. And then later, as I, became an adult, Disney bought Marvel and they bought Star Wars, and right there, that was two other huge aspects of my childhood. So yeah, if Disney somehow acquires Batman from Warner Brothers, they're going to own my entire childhood, and good for them for doing so. But yeah, it was just a huge, huge part. And I remember television used to be very different than it is today. Um, I don't. It's too mean to say that television was a joke because it wasn't. There was still good television and entertainment, but the real big thing when I was a kid was movies. All the best directors, all the best actors, all the money went to movies, and television was an afterthought. Um, Around, I want to say the late 90s, early 2000s, the premium channels like HBO and Showtime, they started pushing the envelope as far as what television was, with shows like The Sopranos, The Wire, Sex and the City, later on being followed by things like Dexter and even hell, Entourage really pushed the envelope. Then the more adult oriented channels like AMC and FX had shows like Nip Tuck and later Breaking Bad and Walking Dead, and really started making television the thing to watch. Like, it wasn't, they could tell great stories throughout a series, and it gave you more with these characters and with these stories, and more for your dollar, like this entertainment, than movies were doing. There were still great movies coming out. There have always been great movies coming out, but television started to shift and become, at least for me, the primary focus of entertainment. And then in 2011, two huge shows for me came out. One was Game of Thrones, which I had known absolutely nothing about. I had no idea who George R.R. Martin was. What drew me to Game of Thrones was Sean Bean. I said, oh my god, Sean Bean in a television show, I have to watch this. And instantly fell in love with the show. I thought it was fantastic. Um, just everything about it. And a few months later, Once Upon a Time premiered. And again, it was a fantasy television show with these fantastic costumes and great acting and great stories that could be told on broadcast television. And I just fell in love with that show as well. Um, we haven't discussed the episodes that really made us love the show yet. We've only, discussed the first two episodes. But the storyline between Rumpelstiltskin and Belle gets me every time. Um, I became an instant fan of Once Upon a Time from the start and followed it through all the way up until about the Frozen slash Ice Queen storyline. I fell off around there. I was moving at the time and changing cable companies, and when I got my new DVR, just forgot to set it for Once Upon a Time. But I came back during the final season and enjoyed the final season very much, and since the show concluded, I've watched it several times on Netflix when it was on Netflix, and then, of course, on Disney Plus when it moved to there. But yeah, the Belle and Rumple storyline was what hooked me, and they took the storyline of Beauty and the Beast and just wove it into their story so beautifully and borrowed or licensed the music, whatever it is, whatever the rights are that you have to go through to get the music, and they would have them wear the costumes and everything, and it just drew me back to that moment of nostalgia, of happiness from my childhood. And the two of them just get me every time. Every time that they break up, every time that they get together, it just breaks my heart every time. But yeah, so Once Upon a Time, I thought was a great show, and it deserved a podcast that looked back at it. And, we have the context of having watched the whole show. We know where characters are going, we know where storylines are going, or where the characters don't go, or where the storylines don't go. And we wanted to look at the behind the scenes information, get some trivia, and put it out there for people to hear, because we thought we enjoy this, other people might enjoy it as well, and grow the podcast and build it at the same time. It's unusual recording by myself. I haven't, experienced something like this possibly ever. I'm not a perfectionist, but I like to do things well. And it bugs me when I don't. Didn't mean to put that in here, but there it is. So, at this point, I think it's safe to conclude this episode. Thank you for joining us. Once again, I've been your host, Jason. Hope to see you again soon. And if Ashley is unfortunately unable to record an episode, I will have material next week to discuss. Thank you, and have a good day.